Hello, freak bitches. I was saying that marijuana can be your friend, and it can enhance your life. But if you take too much, it's such a seductive little creature because a little bit of it is like, this is nice, this feels good. But if you get too crazy, especially if you get too crazy with edibles, it'll take you away on this wild journey of paranoia, and it'll lock you up. Like, some people just need to take a couple of weeks off. Just relax.
That's always a good idea.
It is a good idea, right?
Yeah. I think people underestimate cannabis. I think it can be, like you say, it can really sort of knock you off your center, especially if it's edible. And like all these things, you got to learn how to use it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically, that's what you got to do. You have to learn how to use it. But, you know, that's my rap. So.
Yeah, it is your rap, but it's a great rap. It really is. It's so important. I think it's so important for people to realize that you got to let, like, regular you, like natural, sober you, it's important to be in touch with that. Like, you don't want to always be high or always be caffeinated or always be anything.
Well, exactly. I mean, people get to these places and they fail to do a reality check on themselves. I mean, I get emails from people all the time who says, well, life's been pretty weird lately. I took mushrooms 5 times last week. And, and it's like, dude, how about you lay off for a while and give yourself a chance? Because, they tell these stories and it's like the idea of, okay, let's find your center, go back to baseline, lay off the sauce, whatever it is you're taking, and just chill out and try and rediscover your center. It seems like common sense advice, but people don't do that.
It does seem like common sense advice, but common sense is not common. I mean, I think everybody knows that.
Well, yes, all you have to do is look around to realize that.
What is it about people, though, that once they indulge in any sort of, I mean, it doesn't even have to be a substance. It can be an activity, like gambling, for instance. Mm-hmm. Like, once it gets in your bones, it just seems like you're so compelled to just continue that behavior, and the idea of stopping is almost more painful than the idea of wrecking your life.
This is addiction. This is basically, these things are reinforcing. They activate those pleasure circuits, in the brain, mediated mainly through dopamine, and all of these. I mean, the so-called drugs of abuse, which I think is a terrible word, But, the reinforcing drugs, the pleasure drugs, work directly or indirectly through the dopamine circuits. And the dopamine is like your button for pleasure, in the same way that serotonin is kind of on the opposite side. It's your button for more like euphoria, feeling good, but it doesn't have the punch, I guess, which is why people can get addicted to gambling, they can get addicted to sex, they can get addicted to television, all of these things. It doesn't have to be substances, because they all hit those same circuits, except the psychedelics, which don't work on that reward circuitry. They work on a different set of circuits.
But yet, even with those, your behavior patterns can become addictive. And then you can start just doing psychedelics too much, and it's not even the psychedelics that are doing it. It's just this compulsive need to constantly change your state of mind.
Yeah, that's quite true. And if people, the way to use psychedelics is there are many ways to use it, but basically use it thoughtfully. I mean, you can, all the question about recreational use versus spiritual use versus therapeutic use, I mean, these are all ways to approach it. And I am not a person who says you must do it this way, you must do it that way. What I do say is do it from an informed place and approach it thoughtfully, because, I mean, in other words, don't, plan for it. Respect the medicine in a certain way, use it in a circumstance where you can learn from the medicine rather than have the medicine be sort of a overlay over whatever else you're doing. I mean, this is something that demands attention, and I think that's the best way to use psychedelics. And for whatever spin you put on it, is it spiritual, is it therapeutic, is it recreational, is it shamanic? These are all labels. The important thing is that you have you approach the medicine itself. The medicine is the teacher, right? Not the sitter, not the shaman, not the psychotherapist. If they're doing their job correctly, in my opinion, their job is to let you have your encounter with the medicine. And the medicine is what you learn from. They're there to facilitate that. They can intervene if you get anxious or if things go on, make sure, nobody comes to the door, that kind of thing. But basically, it's to facilitate a learning opportunity where you and your teacher, which is the medicine, be it ayahuasca or mushrooms or whatever, can have this intense one-on-one interaction,
I feel like with psychedelics as well as with all these other things that we're talking about, any kind of drug, even coffee, alcohol, whatever, and behavior patterns, all these different things. I think one of the things that happens with human beings is you get so far along in your life and these behavior patterns become so like tight grooves that are carved into your psyche. And then as you become an adult, then you start to learn like, oh, there's got to be a better way to handle this. Let me figure out how to do this. And it's almost like getting a car when you're really young and not learning how to drive until you're like in your 20s.
Right.
And so you're just driving this thing. It's smashing into trees and grinding the gears. And then somewhere along the line, you're like, oh my God, I'm fucking myself up. I have to figure out a way to do this correctly. And there's two different approaches. There's one, the abstinence approach, which is very popular. People say, well, I'm straight edge now. I don't do anything and that's it. And I just do wheatgrass and I run hills and stuff. I'm like, okay, you could do that too.
Right, you can do it.
You definitely can do that too. But I just don't think that there's anything wrong with any of these things. I think there's something wrong with the way we use them. And I think it's one of the inherent problems with things being illegal is that we can't discuss this. We don't have people like you or centers where people can go, where people can become educated on the proper way to use these drugs or medicines or whatever you want to call them, these compounds, and get something out of them that can really be beneficial.
Right. That's exactly right. I've said this many, many times that, drug education, what they call drug education in this country, is a joke because the whole emphasis is on don't use them. That's absurd. That's like telling, an 18-year-old guy full of testosterone, don't have sex.
Right.
Come on. It's built into the genetics. They're going to go for that. What you have to do, what they can't bring themselves to acknowledge in the drug education field is it's not about telling people not to use drugs. It's about teaching people how to use drugs if they choose to, right? Like any other skill, people have to learn to drive. They have to learn to do yoga. They have to learn to do whatever they do. There's an educational process. I tell people many times, my shtick is there is no such thing as a bad drug. And that's another problem with the dialogue. The badness is projected onto the drugs. The drugs are simply compounds with a certain pharmacology. There's no moral aspect to them. The moral dimension comes in how do people use them. That's where, it's human behavior that's moral or immoral. I say, there's no such thing as a bad drug. Plenty of bad ways to use drugs, but that comes from the person, not the compound.